All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Bow Hunt or Die. Kurt here with part 3 of the Killing Tree series. In part 1, we got to see Todd and Justin go over one of Todd's big buck stacking stands. Part 2, we went with Troy and checked out one of his favorite spots. Part 3, we're going up the hardwood ridge behind me here, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about one of my favorite tree stand setups and how it evolved over time. As many of you guys know, I don't normally hunt out of a tree stand. 98% of my fall I'm spent swinging in a saddle up in the tree. So much like a fisherman hopping weed bed to rock pile to different structures, that's what I like to do during my fall with the saddle. I can kind of just bounce tree to tree, bedding area to bedding area, funnel to funnel, and eventually I catch up with one of the deer that I'm after. But in some cases there's just spots that are going to be good. Why not throw a tree up in there, or a tree stand up in there, and get yourself set up for success? So different than Todd's part 1 spot where he found the tree the first time setting it up, and he started killing bucks out of it and it stayed there ever since. Mine has evolved over time. Mine kind of started back in 2019, and now we've worked our way through a couple different trees until the one that I believe is truly the killing tree. So without further ado, let's dive into it. All right, so I wanted to quickly dive into kind of the history and the evolution of this spot and really why I started to hone in onto this ridge in the first place. And really it boils down to 2 specific hunts that I had in a food plot just east of here. The first one was November 14th, 2019. And I don't know if you guys remember that week of November in 2019, but here in the Midwest, it was brutally cold. I remember being so happy that I finally wrapped my tag around a buck that so I could go down to the Mississippi River and just shoot ducks, because that north wind was just shoving the ducks down the river. And my buddies and I, when we hunted that weekend, we were busting ice to get out to our favorite duck hunting holes. But November 14th was no different. It was snow on the ground, brutally cold. Had a couple does work out into this food plot one evening, and I remember watching this big buck step out of this hardwood ridge, come right down the line, right into the food plot, chase the doe around in a circle, right to me at 15 yards, wrap my tag around him that evening. It was absolutely perfect. But I took that mental note of where that buck came from and where those does came from and applied it to the following year, because I had never hunted this farm. I'd never hunted this tree stand. So I was kind of intrigued to see where, some of these bedding spots were. Sure enough, trail camera history, hunting out of this stand, deer were coming from this ridge top. October 1st then of 2020, Todd and I come out to do a little hunting on opening day. I shot a doe right away in the evening out of the exact same tree stand, same food plot. And sure enough, right at last light, here comes a really nice young buck that we had. He was a super tight rack, cool, tall tine, 10-point, with some like crab claw action going on. Super cool young buck. I wish I'd have known whatever happened to him, because he kind of fell off the face of the earth. But he came from the same hardwood ridge as the buck did the year before. And I thought to myself, season end, I'm going to go up in there and just see where these deer are bedding, what kind of signs up there. And sure enough, Todd and I went up there in the spring of 2021, and we found a pile of sheds. And really how this spot lays out, it's like a big thumb ridge top, super steep here. I'm in the driftless region of Illinois, so it's really hilly. We've got a lot of up and down that goes on. And so how I was accessing the food plot was this old little driveway that runs up to the food plot on the east side here. Well, this ridge top, I thought to myself, if I can get to the food plot on this driveway, why can't I'm already walking by this ridge, why can't I get into here in the mornings? So we found the sign, we found the sheds, we found where deer were bedding, we found all the fall history, we found a spot where I could get a tree stand in. And I thought to myself, this is gonna be one of my experimental spots on an east wind, because the ridge kind of lays in a northeast to south west, topography wise. And I thought to myself, maybe on some of these east winds, we're going to get some deer bedding on the toe of this slope overlooking the big valley behind me. That was the thought. I set the tree stand up. I hunted it several times. I didn't have any luck on any east wind. It didn't matter. Southeast, east, northeast. It just didn't pay off. I never saw anything that I wanted to see until we got a northwest wind at the end of October. It was October 23rd. And I remember being opening day of duck season out on the river looking at the trail camera and thinking to myself, shoot, I should be there, because the bucks are up on the mock scrape right now just pounding this ridge top. It was buck after buck after buck. So the next chance that I got to get in there on a cold front was October 30th. and I risked it. And I went into this stand, which was not good for a west wind, but it was northwest, and I thought it's really risky, but I'm going to try it. I snuck up in here, and I had one heck of a hunt. That buck that came in on me was the buck that I call the hole in the horn buck. Really cool old deer. He comes up with the doe. Sure enough, he's in a really bad spot, but he's heading the other way. And looking back at it, what I should have done was just let him go. But in the heat of the moment, and I'm a guy that just loves to aggressively call, I grunted, snort wheezed at him. He whips around, sure enough, gets right downwind of me. He's out of there. Immediately that told me I need to get out of this spot. This is not the killing tree. This is the killing spot, but I need to move. So the next cold front that was coming through was November 2nd, northwest wind, exact same wind as it was on October 30th. And I said, I'm getting up there with the saddle. I'm going to shift around on this ridge top, kind of to the south side of this ridge top where these deer are bedding, and hopefully get one of these bucks to come swinging through. Sure enough, absolutely textbook. I snuck in up into the saddle, got into this tiny little hickory tree. The only trees that I had to choose from in there was a small little hickory or this giant oak, which you can see in one of my opening videos when the buck that I ended up harvesting that day was coming in. That eventually becomes the tree that I put the stand in. So I'm sitting in this little hickory tree right off the bat in the morning. Buck snort wheezes over the hill coming from the destination food source to the north. He comes up, he swings into my mock scrape, stands there guarding it for several minutes. At one point he grunted and snort wheezed at me. And I just kept his attention long enough until he turned to give me a good enough shot. Snuck a quartering away shot right up into him, runs 50 yards and expires. That's when I knew, this is it. I've got it now. I know where I need to be. So that's how that evolution of this stand came to be. And the following year, Todd and I came in the summer of 2022. We moved my stand from the tree that I had for the east wind, moved it over to where I had shot the buck out of the saddle on the northwest west wind, and we stuck it into that big oak tree that I couldn't get my straps around in the morning with the saddle, and got them around in there during the summertime when we could make a bunch of noise and do what we had to do. Now it's up in this big white oak tree, which I'll take you up there and show you guys a little bit about it. It's a big tree. It's got a heck of a lot of cover, and everything ties together beautifully now. And what I'll do now is I'll talk a little bit about where I park, how I access it, how I get into the tree stand, and why it just seems to work so well. And one hunt that Todd and I had in November of 2022 that really solidified as why I think this is going to be the killing tree. So if there's one very apparent thing that comes from these killing tree series is access. Access is truly everything. You cannot have a good spot if you're scaring all the deer on your way to it. And human tendency in a spot like this with this gravel road here would be to drive right to the base of the ridge top and just beeline right up the hill fast and easy right into the back door of this tree stand. But the problem is this gravel road drives right around the destination food source that these deer are utilizing during the evenings. And when you bump them off of that in the mornings, they're just scattershot throughout, and you'll still see the occasional deer here, but you just don't get as good of action as you will when I park way down in the bottom in the creek bottom. So what I do now, instead of driving right to the base and being lazy, I park back about 400 yards. I completely avoid the destination food source. And what I do is I will get out of the truck, I'll dump down into the creek. I will utilize the creek to walk my way up a little bit and hop into a mowed fire break that we have along this prairie. So this prairie gives me a little bit of this structure that then hides me from anything on the opposite ridge. And then where the big destination food source is, where most of these deer are coming from in the evenings to come back to bed in the mornings, I'm seeing a lot of these deer out there, and there happens to be it's almost like a perfect berm that gives me a little bit of cover to just slip in through that prairie, right in the back door onto this gravel road and up into the tree stand itself. Another huge component to getting into the stand, because as you know, you can kind of hoof it pretty quick the first 300 yards, but then when we hit this road and you're within earshot of the bedding area, that's where it becomes super critical, where I have to tiptoe my way in there. And what I find is right when we get the first good frost, you know, somewhere around October 10th to 15th, when we really get all the leaves to start dumping, you get the walnuts, you start getting some of the hickory leaves to drop, I go in and I'll go in an afternoon or an evening. I've done it at night before too, when the deer have kind of cleared out into the destination spots, and I will literally rake from the base of my tree stand down to this gravel road, actually this little cedar tree here behind me as my visual. So when I can come up in here in the dark, maybe be shining a little bit of a light, I'll find that cedar tree and have myself a raked 2-foot wide dirt path right to the back door of the stand. I leave way less scent on the ground when I'm not walking through grass and tall stuff, you know, dragging my legs. I'm literally just walking on a carpet of dirt. It is silent. I've gotten in here in the evenings before, having deer bedded within 50 yards of me, slip right in the back door, right up the tree, and they don't even know. So it's a really, really cool spot. I can slip into it so easily, but then the components of everything up there just tie it together perfectly. Well, as you guys could see as we came up that hill there, you could kind of catch every once in a while a little bit of the remnant trail that I rake out normally to get in the back door of the tree stand. And like I said, I like that because I get all this ground cover away. Obviously, all this taller vegetation that we have now here in the summer has died off, so it's a lot shorter vegetation for the most part. But just getting that vegetation, the leaf matter away, walking on bare dirt, of course the deer are going to end up utilizing it a little bit. That's why I try to have it switchbacking instead of just sneaking in straight from the south into my stand. I try to do it on an angle from the west, so that way if there are deer utilizing it, if they don't pick up my ground scent, they're not going to pick up my air scent because I'm blowing my wind the opposite direction of them or perpendicular to it, so they're not coming behind me. So that's one other big tip with this tree stand that tends to come in handy, because the deer do utilize the trail that I make to come in. Other than that, it's in a big white oak tree, as you can see there behind me. And let me tell you, that thing has a pile of cover. It's like you're sitting in an eagle's nest up at the top of that tree in November, and it's cool because you can kind of see off into these other ridges, and it's just a beautiful spot to be, unless it's really windy and you're just eating a straight north wind when it's cold. But I can deal with that because it's November and it's what we live for. But it is awesome cover. You've got big trunks, multi-stem trunks coming from different directions, so it doesn't matter which way the deer are coming from, they just don't seem to see you. Like, it just, you're invisible up there, it seems like. And then on top of it all, not only do you have this big, thick shrub thicket here, basically on the top, spine of the ridge where a lot of these deer are bedding, but you've also got a mock scrape here that I started in 2021. This thing gets mutilated during the fall. Yeah, I mean, I've seen deer up in here in the summertime too, but I usually run my DS4K in here from October 1st through the whole rest of the season until the SD card fills up or the batteries die. It is an awesome, awesome mock scrape. I have gotten so many videos of fawns, does, big bucks, little bucks, everything in between, little sparring action, you know, just deer doing deer things, and it cannot get any better. And to then on top of it be upwind of your tree stand 15 yards, it is a killer spot. And though this is the exact same scrape where I shot One-Eyed Willie from, I have yet to actually kill a deer from my killing tree. So I'm just calling my shot preemptively. But the reason I do think that that tree is the final tree is just the history of everything that's gone on with it, knowing that I've got two food sources to the north and the northeast that these deer kind of go out to in the evenings, but in the mornings come back. I've got great access coming from the back side in the back door here. And then the final hunt that really solidified it for me was November 16th, I believe, of 2022. And I'm not sure if Todd ended up finding any of this footage or not, but we had a hunt together where Todd was shooting, I was filming. It felt like we were in a winter wonderland, Texas, if that makes any sense. I'm not kidding. Every time we touched the antlers together that day, we'd rattle in a buck. Here comes a fork horn. Here comes a 6. Here comes an 8-pointer. Here comes a nice wide young buck. He came right in. He was face up in the scrape. I've got a little bit of cell phone footage and pictures that I'll post if Todd didn't end up finding his end of the footage there. But just an unbelievable hunt to end it with the last two encounters being at around midday, 10, 11 o'clock. One buck came right through the middle of the bedding area. but unfortunately didn't commit the full way because he had heard the rattling. He stood at the edge of the brush and was kind of looking in, didn't see anything out here. And then another deer went running off and he went after them. And then the final big deer that came in on us unfortunately slipped around behind us, but because of the topography, even though he slipped downwind of our calling, our wind was blowing up over the top of him, going right to the freaking moon with thermals. He just snuck right around behind us and he moved on to a different spot where I had another trail camera, and I ended up getting video of that buck on trail camera, which I'll post too here. But unbelievable big deer, beautiful day, awesome hunt. That to me told me, okay, this is it. It worked. We got in quietly. We saw bucks after bucks after bucks. It will eventually come together. Now, unfortunately, last year I didn't even get up here but once. And I saw a couple deer that day, but never ended up getting any of them. But again, it tells me that, hey, I can get in here secretly and quietly, and it works. It's going to work if I put the time in. So hopefully you guys could get a little bit of a better idea of my favorite killing tree here. Though it hasn't killed one specifically yet, I have killed one big buck out of my saddle in the tree next door. And you can see kind of the evolution, the thought process on how I just tied everything together when it came to the food options, the access to get in the back door, the tree specifically, and the perfect spot to put the mock scrape in order to make a great killing tree. So stay tuned for part 4, guys. Hopefully you enjoy this little series. It's a lot of fun getting it to you guys and kind of diving into a little bit more detail on our favorite tree stands.